Now, the Temple of the Feathered Serpent is probably one of the most elaborate buildings at Teotihuacan, and it is in an area that has been called the Ciudadela, and has really kind of become the heart of the city, and people believe it was the home of the ruling family. So you can see there are different kinds of effigies carved into the side of it. Here's a close one of a feathered serpent along with the fire serpent, so both kind of air, rain, storm deity things. We also find quite a few sacrifices underneath the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. We find about 40 individuals. We believe they were warriors because of the artifacts that were found with them. We find human jaws associated necklaces. We find different kinds of weapons. And some people have kind of referred this to a Star Wars cult because it does seem to be associated with warriors and so forth. But again, that's a pretty important individual or building if it has 40 sacrificed individuals, particularly if they're warriors. Huge population. Estimates range from 125 to 200,000. The Teotihuacanos actually built apartments. So we have these apartment complexes, and there's about 2,000 of them total in the city. And some of them are constructed of adobe, some are done of stone, an indication of variation in social status. Some of the complexes could hold up to about 100 people. We have rooms that surround a central courtyard. There are kitchens, there are storerooms. We have subfloor burials and a lot of domestic refuse in these apartment complexes. Some of the complexes we do see differences in the burials. So some are under the structure floors with some grave goods, but then we have some very rich burials that are found underneath shrines, and those are only of male. So we can see that this is probably patrilineal society. We find murals painted in some of the buildings of the apartment complexes. They have drainage systems. So if you think about back to Harappa, where we saw those drainage systems there, we have that going on here also. The apartment complexes themselves seem to be clustered around small temples. So they might have functioned as neighborhood churches, kind of integrating adjoining compounds, a way for the state to more closely control individuals. Some of them do appear to have, not the churches, the apartment complexes, appear to have been organized economically. So we might find some where there's primarily pottery remains and kilns. We might find other places where there's stone tool making, obsidian working, and so forth. So it does look like some of them had a specialized function. We also have evidence of barrios or neighborhoods where we have a different style of architecture that pops up than what we would see in the other apartment complexes. So this one here is often referred to as the Merchants Barrio, and it's in the Veracruz style. So that's that Gulf Coast area. So we find artifacts from that area in this barrio, and we find the houses are in the same styles that we would find in the Veracruz area. So the houses are round. We find pottery from Veracruz. We find cotton, cinnabar, bird feathers, and all those are kind of all associated with trade goods from Veracruz. So it looks like they were actually getting migrants, probably traders, from different areas of Mesoamerica that were settling in the city, and that's probably how the elites were kind of establishing their economic ties with Teotihuacan. Lots of craft specialization. Over 600 workshops have been identified. Over half of them are obsidian working, but we find workshops where they're making grinding stones, where they're making jewelry, where they're working with shells, textiles, ceramics. And here's just some examples of some of their fine ceramics. They had a utilitarian ware, which is kind of the Corel ware of the past. And then we have this fine ware, which is kind of the fine china of the past. Polychrome painting, so it's very elaborate. Then we also have these articulated clay puppets, so possibly toys. Good, but they're always kind of found in piles. They're not really found all over the place. And then we have, these are called the host figures. When you take off the breastplate, the great goddess figurine is usually on the inside. Again, we're not really sure of the significance of that. And then again, here's just one of the obsidian figurines that have been found on the site. Some people suggest that a lot of these things, particularly like pottery and so forth, were sold at the Great Compound or again, the market. Teotihuacan, we see it start to decline around 1250 BP. It's a pretty rapid decline. So about 50 years, we see the hinterland settlements stop sending goods into the city, and that totally undermines Teotihuacan's economic base. We see increased military presence during this time, so it's possible that the state was using the military to repress people. Sometime in this 50-year period, the Ciudadela is attacked. We see temples that are burned. So it's possible that they were attacking that religious base of the state. So if they had used that religion to build up their power and to kind of authenticate their rights to rule by attacking it and undermining it, boy, that just kind of pulls the rug out from underneath the elites. We find statues that are defaced, skeletons sprawled in the streets. So there are some indications of an uprising of the actual Teotihuacano citizens. But some of the pottery suggested that there was a foreign invasion. So who knows, maybe it was a combination of both. And here's a nice reconstruction of the Pyramid of the Sun, and then you can see a lot of the buildings that would have been around it. After the fall of Teotihuacan, there's kind of a power vacuum, and we see a lot of independent polities spring up in kind of central Mexico. So we have Cantona, which is actually in the modern-day state of Puebla. We have El Tajín in Veracruz, and you can see their pyramid style is quite a bit different than what we've seen before. We have Xochicalco, which is in southwest of Cuernavaca, so still in that kind of central Mexico, just kind of south. And you can see the elaborate carving here. We've still got the feathered serpent motif, so we've got that connection to know we're talking about cultural continuity of people. And then La Quemada is the Zacatecas peoples that live north of Teotihuacan. You can kind of think of this as a frontier settlement. But again, you can see we've got an incredibly different pyramid style here. So we're seeing some breaking away from the Teotihuacan power base. Now, some of these places, like Xochicalco and La Quemada, actually have defensive works, and they're situated in pretty defensible areas. So conflict does appear to have been a concern as people struggled for power. Now, within the actual Valley of Mexico itself, we see a number of rulers kind of fighting for power in the particular valley. And it's not